Welcome to Evidence-Based Interventions under the Every Student Succeeds Act. This presentation is provided by the Innovation and Support Team within the Office of Federal and State Accountability at the South Carolina Department of Education. By the end of this presentation, participants will be able to define evidence-based interventions, identify the 4 tiers of evidence as defined by the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, and explain the differences between them, and locate resources for finding and implementing evidence-based interventions. This is a model of a continuous school improvement process. Step 1 is to identify strengths and weaknesses through a comprehensive needs assessment. Step 2, once the needs are identified and prioritized, begin to search for and select evidence-based interventions. The remaining 3 steps include Step 3, the development of an action plan. Step 4, implementation of the plan with fidelity. And finally, Step 5, monitor, evaluate, and revise as needed. This presentation focuses on selecting relevant evidence-based interventions to address identified needs. The No Child Left Behind Act had a focus on selecting and implementing scientifically based, research-backed interventions. ESSA shifted to selecting and implementing evidence-based interventions and defined the levels of evidence. The shift was designed to help increase the impact of educational investments by ensuring that interventions were as effective as possible in leading to desired outcomes that supports or improves student achievement. This aligns with the vision of the South Carolina Department of Education to support continuous school improvement practices that involves moving from compliance to quality to engagement to ensure all students are successful in meeting the profile of the South Carolina graduate. Evidence-based means an activity, strategy, or intervention that demonstrates a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes or other relevant outcomes based on one or more well-designed and well-implemented research studies. ESSA emphasizes the use of evidence-based activities, strategies, and interventions, collectively referred to as interventions. ESSA defines an evidence-based intervention as being supported by strong evidence, moderate evidence, promising evidence, or evidence that demonstrates a rationale. This is a model of the ESSA tiers of evidence. Tier 1, strong evidence, supported by one or more well-designed and well-implemented randomized control experimental studies. Tier 2, moderate evidence, supported by one or more well-designed and well-implemented quasi-experimental studies. Tier 3, promising evidence, supported by one or more well-designed and well-implemented correlational studies with statistical controls for selection bias. Tier 4, demonstrates a rationale, practices that have a well-defined logic model or theory of action, are supported by research, and have some effort underway by an SEA, LEA, or outside research organization to determine their effectiveness. Let's look at an example of each tier. Tier 1, strong evidence, evidence backed by an experimental study or randomized control trial. Often referred to as the gold standard, the study randomly assigns subjects to either a treatment group that received the intervention or a control group that did not receive the intervention. Participants are randomly assigned to each group. The study must have a large sample size of at least 350 participants and implemented in multi-sites with similar settings and similar students. The study meets What Works Clearinghouse evidence standards without reservations. Tier 2, Moderate Evidence. Evidence backed by a study that uses a quasi-experimental design. This study uses two comparison groups and uses either characteristics of the students to match up pairs between the two groups or a natural cutoff to compare those on either side of the cutoff. Students are not randomly assigned. The study must have a large sample size of at least 350 participants and implemented in multi-sites with a similar setting or similar students. The study meets What Works Clearinghouse evidence standards with or without reservations. Tier 3, Promising Evidence. A correlational study is a formal study that is conducted to determine if there is a correlation between the intervention and a given outcome. The study is commonly conducted through data collection and analysis. The study shows a statistically significant and positive effect on the intended outcome. The study is not overridden by statistically significant and negative evidence from other studies on the intervention. The study uses sampling and/or analytic methods to reduce or account for differences between the intervention group and a comparison group. The study controls for factors such as socioeconomic status or gender that could bias the results. Tier 4 demonstrates a rationale. To demonstrate a rationale, the intervention should include 1. A well-specified logic model that is informed by research or an evaluation that suggests how the intervention is likely to improve relevant outcomes. And 2. An effort to study the effect of the intervention, ideally producing promising evidence or higher, that will happen as a part of the intervention or is underway elsewhere. This could mean another SCA, LEA, or research organization is studying the intervention elsewhere to inform stakeholders about the success of that intervention. Some federal title programs require certain levels of evidence to support selected interventions. Interventions applied under Title I, School Improvement for Schools, designated as CSI, ATSI, TSI, are required to have strong, moderate, or promising evidence, Tiers 1 through 3, to support them. Other programs under Titles 1 through 4 can rely on Tiers 1 through 4. Now that you have an understanding of the 4 levels of evidence defined by ESSA, let's look at some resources that will help you find evidence-based interventions that meets your district's or school's need and the required level of evidence for various funding sources. The non-regulatory guidance, Using Evidence to Strengthen Education Investments, is a guide for understanding the levels of evidence defined by ESSA. The guide also includes other considerations to note, including local capacity when searching for and selecting interventions. What Works Clearinghouse is a searchable repository for existing research on different programs, products, practices, and policies in education. They aim to answer the question, what works in education? Their goal is to provide educators with the information needed to make evidence-based decisions. If you're not familiar with What Works Clearinghouse, this webinar will provide a tutorial on how to use the What Works Clearinghouse features to search and find evidence-based interventions, programs, policies, and practices that work. Evidence for ESSA is a site provided by the Center for Research and Reform in Education at Johns Hopkins University. This site provides a searchable database of information on programs that meet the ESSA evidence standards and enable educators and communities to select effective educational tools to improve student success. It identifies for you the level of evidence under ESSA that is associated with a given program, provides you with a snapshot of what the program looks like and cost, identifies the grades, communities, and children included in the program's evaluations, and points you in the direction of more information about the program, its evaluations, and implementation. As you're searching for evidence-based interventions, here are some things to consider. Look at all of the evidence, not only one study. Are there interventions supported by strong evidence or moderate evidence? What do the majority of the studies on this intervention find? Does the intervention have positive and statistically significant effects on important student or other relevant outcomes? Or are there no, negative, or not statistically significant findings? Were studies conducted in settings and with populations relevant to the local context, for example, students with disabilities or multilanguage learners? If strong evidence or moderate evidence is not available, is there promising evidence? Does the intervention demonstrate a rationale that suggests it may work? For example, it is represented in a logic model supported by research. How can the success of the intervention be measured? What are resources required to implement this intervention? Will the potential impact of this intervention justify the cost, or are there more cost-effective interventions that will accomplish the same outcomes? What is the local capacity to implement this intervention? Are there available funds? Do staff have the needed skills? Is there buy-in for the intervention? How does this intervention fit into larger strategic goals and other existing efforts? How will this intervention be sustained over time? Does the intervention align with the needs assessment, current strategic and renewal plan long-term goals, and annual objectives? Once you have selected that evidence-based intervention that is aligned with the ESSA levels of evidence and the needs of the school community, then it is time to develop a plan for implementing the selected intervention. This is the next step in a continuous improvement process. This concludes this presentation on evidence-based interventions aligned with the Every Student Succeeds Act. For further assistance, contact a member of the Innovation and Support Team and the Office of Federal and State Accountability at the South Carolina Department of Education.